Hello. Normally I cover audio and video technology on this channel. The more obscure, the better. But today we're doing something else because 2.5 years ago we had a system installed here and we want to talk about how that didn't quite fulfill everything we wanted of it and how we've fixed that problem. So 2.5 years ago we had a solar system installed on the house and a Tesla Powerwall. The solar system is 6.4 kilowatts peak, but is on a 5 kilowatt inverter, and a single Tesla Powerwall 2 with 13.5 kilowatt hour capacity stores the charge from the day when there's more than we need and discharges it at night. And crucially also, it can be used during the winter or when it's not sunny to take energy from the grid at cheap rate and give us that during the day. Let me show you though some of the plots you can get from the Tesla Powerwall app, and actually there's another app which I will come to later called Powerwall Companion, which can be quite useful as well for looking at some of this data. So let me show you some typical plots and you'll see why it wasn't quite fulfilling our needs as it stood and how we fixed it. Now let me start by saying that because of the business, we do audio and video transfers, I have a lot of computers running and air conditioning and video recorders and equipment that consumes a lot of energy. So our electricity consumption is very much on the higher side of normal. Okay, this was a dull day in May. So looking at the Tesla Powerwall app, it shows us the charge in and out of the Powerwall. This is the charge level, and we can see here the amount of light output we got from the solar cells. So we didn't get an enormous amount of energy. It peaked at several kilowatts, but it really was a very poor day. And so what happened was the battery was charged overnight on cheap rate electricity and then discharged here, this is this blue, into the house, and the charge level fell, and by a bit gone midday the battery was flat, and then we had to start using grid electricity at peak rate. So this is the grid, and you can see this is where it's charging the Powerwall, that's of the green, and this is where it's running the house in the blue, and that's our cheap rate overnight electricity. Then we weren't using any electricity at all from the grid during the portion of the day that the Powerwall had some charge in it, and then by a bit gone midday we were using all this peak rate electricity again because we'd run out. So that was the problem we were having, that our consumption was too high for a single Powerwall to be able to run the house until anywhere near cheap rate electricity overnight, which in our case starts at midnight. Now on a sunnier day you would get a much better response. Let's have a look at a sunny day. So this was the following day. We had a decent amount of solar output on this day, so we again charged at cheap rate overnight. It's possible actually it could have saved us some money by not 100% charging. It does look at the weather forecast, and sometimes if you've got a really sunny day coming up it won't do 100% charge, but on this day it did. It started to go down as we used the energy, and then solar took over, ran the house and also charged the battery up to 100%, and then it discharged into the night, and it made it to approaching midnight. So on this particular day the Powerwall plus the solar was enough to keep us off using peak rate electricity for pretty much the entire day. So we used off peak here, and then we actually charged, went the other way, we put energy into the grid, and we only used a tiny bit of peak rate at the end of the day, and that would have gone on into the following half hour as well here, which would also be peak rate. So this particular day was extremely good considering it was only in May, and the single Powerwall did a pretty good job, and we do get paid for this energy that we export out into the grid. Not as much as we buy electricity for at night, but not massive shortfall. So This particular day would have paid very little for our electricity, a really good day. But unfortunately, British weather, we tend to get more days like this where we end up paying for peak rate electricity for a large portion of the day. Let's go and have a look further back into the winter time. Okay, this is around about the shortest day of the year in December, and so the solar output never really peaked at more than about a kilowatt. It was absolutely dreadful. The battery obviously let go really early. I mean, that was just terrible. It let go around about looks like about 10 a.m. And so we were on grid power for nearly all of the day. Really, that was a very expensive day in terms of electricity. So we obviously need to improve that. But just before I discuss what we've done, I just wanted to show you this as a typical day where there was a forecast for lots of sunshine, and indeed there was lots of sunshine. So on this particular day, the charge level overnight on the cheap rate electricity was very restricted, hardly any charge at night, because it knew full well that it'd get a full charge during the day. Our original system was installed by a company at the time called Phoenix, and they renamed to Egg. That was the solar and the Powerwall and the inverter and the gateway, and I've covered all of that in previous YouTube videos. In fact, there's I'll put up here the playlist so you can easily access all of that information. Now, that system I calculated was going to pay for itself in about 4 years. It may have extended slightly since energy costs have fallen a bit, but it's in that order of things, and we're now well into the 3rd year of that system being installed, so it's a long way through the process of being fully paying for itself. But I kept seeing this shortfall in energy, so I've decided to go for a second Powerwall. Now, it should be said that Powerwalls are not just useful for people with solar. They can be useful for people who don't have solar but just want to be able to use that off-peak electricity at night, which is a lot cheaper. It's around about a third of the cost of peak rate electricity. So it has a potential to save money for anybody. We're going to shortly see the installer fitting that, but I would say that after that we'll come back again, because I'm going to have a Zoom call with Egg about the whole system, and also quite a lot of information about the Powerwall 3, because we're on the Powerwall 2 system. Right, so let's get stuck in to the installation of the second Powerwall.
So I'm Kieran from Heron Electrical. I was here for the original install. And,
right, it was then Phoenix.
Yes, it was. Yeah. I've since moved companies over to Heron, which have a close working relationship with Egg. Yeah, right, now okay. It is. So yeah, we're here to install another Powerwall. Right.
And you're making some changes here.
Yeah, so we're putting everything on its own 30 milliamp bidirectional RCBOs. Due to recent reg changes and stuff like that, we're just getting prepped for that. So yeah, it's nothing really exciting going on in here. Not that much has to change really.
Right. But you do, the second Powerwall is going to be wired into the gateway.
So the communications cable between the Powerwall, the first one, and the second one.
So we don't need a second network cable?
But we need a second power cable, because each Powerwall can discharge at 5 kilowatts. Yeah. So they each need, they both need 6 mil cable feeding them.
Marvellous. Okay, right, I'll let you get on.
No worries, cheers mate.
Right. Good, so the second Powerwall is installed and running. It'll take a few days to settle out and start working to its peak. I would like to talk with one of the project managers at Egg to discuss the system we have, and also the potential in the future for the new Powerwall 3 system available from Tesla. So let's go and speak to project manager Dave Simpson on a Zoom call now.
Well, I'm Dave Simpson. I'm one of the project managers here at Egg. We do all things renewable, whether that's solar storage, battery, just solar, EV charging, and yeah.
Okay. And as you may know, when you were previously called Phoenix,
yes,
2 years ago, you installed on our place a fairly large solar array. I think 6.4 kilowatt peak from the solar, but it's actually a 5 kilowatt inverter. And we had a single Tesla Powerwall. But we've found that we're flattening that Powerwall pretty much every day because our energy consumption is quite high. I run a business from home. I've got like 6 computers running all the time and air conditioning and stuff. So now, I mean, when you're designing a system, do you look at the energy consumption of the property and think, oh, that's going to need 2 Powerwalls, really?
Yes. So that's part of our design. It's part of our kind of remit with our clients that we will ask you for your bills. We'll have a look at them, see what your consumption's like, and we input into the design whilst we're doing it. And if it comes out that you do need 1, 2, however many, that's how it's then calculated.
Do you find it's a bit of a hard sell though, getting people to even go with 1 Powerwall, let alone 2?
Sometimes, but that's, to be fair, that's the nature of the world at the minute. Listen, it's a lot of people haven't got disposable income. Is the honest answer for what 1 Powerwall, let alone solar. It's the way of the world, and things are coming in that are helping people. But we will get there in the end, and hopefully everybody will be able to save energy, save money on their bills in the long run.
Right. Well, in our case, I think we ended up realising it wasn't so much whether we could afford solar and Powerwall, it's whether we could afford not to.
That's very true.
With our consumption, the first system of the solar and Powerwall, I calculated it was going to pay itself for around about 4 years, which is extremely low, isn't it? And we're now we're about 3 years in, almost 3 years in.
Almost paid it.
So it's well on the way. So hence we've gone for this second Powerwall. I think it's true to say, and tell me if I'm wrong, that when the export payments you get for surplus solar, when they're very poor compared to what you pay for incoming electricity during day or night, then a Powerwall is going to pay for itself in terms of plugging that gap, saving all the energy that you were otherwise going to export for pennies and bringing it back for you to use. And that was the case. We were with Bulb and then we got ported across to Octopus. And when we joined with Octopus, the amount they paid you compared to the amount they charge you for electricity was shockingly poor. It was really unfair.
Still like that as well. It's
a little better now insofar as now at least they will pay you approaching what they charge at night time. So at least it's a little bit fairer.
It's still nowhere near that they charge you, but hey, it's one of them things.
But the way we are now looking at our energy consumption and the battery for much of the year is not so much about salvaging the spare energy from the solar system in the middle of summer. It's more about being able to use the Powerwall to retain your cheap rate electricity rate all throughout the day. And to that effect, it starts to feel like the people who could benefit from a Powerwall are not just those with solar, but very often those who don't even have solar.
Absolutely. So some people aren't able to have solar because the roof's not adequate. They're facing, they've not got a roof facing south that's going to give them the best option. There's lots of different things, and that's why sometimes solar's better, sometimes just a battery's better, sometimes a battery and solar. There's lots of variables that come into it, and it's part of kind of the process of sitting down with a client and going, what are your requirements? What are your budget more than anything? That's another question. Are you able to do both? Can you just do one? And then it's a balancing act to find out what's best for them in their situation.
And I think sometimes it's a kind of a bang for buck, isn't it? That one Powerwall could save a lot and the second Powerwall might save a bit less, but still be worth it potentially over a long time.
Potentially, definitely.
But if someone's on a tight budget, then just go for the Powerwall and at least do something.
Yes, exactly that, and you will see you'll see the benefits. You'll definitely see the benefits.
Now I know energy bills have come down. In fact, they're due to come down a bit more shortly, aren't they? The cap is coming down a bit because in the worst of it, about 18 months ago or so, the savings from solar and Powerwall were absolutely huge. It was a complete no-brainer.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's maybe a little less now, but still can be very much worth it if you're a high energy consumer. It could well be that if there's an elderly person, they're living on their own, they're not using a lot of electricity, it doesn't make sense for them.
It's finding that fine balance between when it's appropriate.
Yeah. Do you get many customers who take a Powerwall only?
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, it's literally it's designed around the client. So if that is best for them, we'll put it to them.
Right.
You want to go on a renewable journey.
We had our second Powerwall mounted beside the first, what's kind of around the corner. But they can be stacked up to 3 deep, can't they? Which do you normally recommend, and is there a cost implication either way?
So there's not normally a cost implication unless it's a bespoke install, it's something out of the ordinary. And the way they're installed, as long as it's installed to the manufacturer's instruction, it's down to space, adequate space for them, what the client wants, and if we stack them 3 deep, are they going to be in the way of the client? And also down to the installer. Like I said, there's no cost to that, but there's other elements that come into play when it says how are we going to do it or where we're going to put them.
So is serviceability an issue with stacking them, or do you not tend to service them anyway?
It goes back to as long as manufacturer instructions are followed, the manufacturers say it's right to be able to service them at that stage.
Right, but presumably if you have a problem with the innermost one, which might be the oldest as well, you've got yourself a bit of extra work.
Yes, but that's part and parcel of the job sometimes. Like I said, sometimes you'll go and it's a nice easy install where 2 Powerwalls are side by side. Sometimes they're mounted back to back, and it's part and parcel.
And do you have to service Tesla Powerwalls sometimes?
Yeah, some of our contractors go out and service them and make little tweaks to the systems. Right. So yeah, we do go out to them.
What sort of things might have to be done? Presumably you can't change the cells, can you?
No. It's mainly just make sure they're working to capacity, make sure they're charging correctly. Any issues with the cabling and stuff, it's normally just a quick look over and a general sort of
clean out the fans and things.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. And are there any other Powerwalls that you install apart from Tesla ones?
We do other types of battery. Right. We mainly go towards the SolarEdge units. They go up to they do residential and commercial, so they go all the way up to the hundreds of kilowatts.
Oh right.
Again, it's scalable all the way up to that size. Yeah, the only thing with them, they don't do the backup that the Powerwalls.
Right.
So that's one of the advantages of going with a Powerwall, that you will get them.
In the event of a power outage, the Powerwall takes over. Though it should be said, as I discovered quite quickly, that doesn't mean it's a giant UPS, because no. It's off for a second or something. And so you don't expect all the computers and things to keep working, because they won't. One of the things I find a little frustrating, and I was actually speaking to the installer about this, and we worked out there was a way you could work around it, is that in the event of a power outage, and where we live we get quite a lot, you get a glitch while the battery takes over, the Powerwall takes over, but then you don't know, other than by looking at the app, if your broadband is still working, you don't know whether the main supply is on or off. There's no easy way of telling that you're running on the Powerwall other than looking at the app. And if you've got broadband outage...
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So there is on the gateway a non-backed up outlet. And if you were to connect that up, but it means installing RCDs and stuff, I mean, it wouldn't be simple or cheap, but if you connect that up to one outlet, you could have one outlet in the house that wasn't backed up and maybe have a bleeper or an alarm or some sort of thing on there that sounds when the power is off on that one, and then you know you're on Powerwall. And it matters, because you'll think, I don't want to run the electric shower, I don't necessarily want to run the oven, I'd rather keep the lights on. Yeah, it's
certain loads, like you say, in the case of a power outage, you want your main systems on, and maybe not others. Yeah, I understand that and totally agree with it, to be honest.
So they could have made that a little bit easier.
Dispersion to the correct loads during that time.
Even just a light somewhere to tell you, you know, on the gateway, ooh, power outage situation. But there's nothing, is there? There's no indicator. So bit of a fail there, isn't it? But you can work around it.
We'll try and feed it back to Tesla. You never know. On the next one, they might put one on.
Do you know there's something else I would love to feed back to Tesla? Is that typically you'll charge at night. If you have a solar and Powerwall installation, you'll charge at night, but you'll charge less if, and it obviously has a connection to a weather forecaster, not just for the storm watch, which is kind of a separate issue, but it must know the solar prediction for the following day. Because on a very sunny day, it'll only charge like 20% because it knows full well it'll get the rest of the charge. Were you not aware of this? You're looking a little surprised.
That's a very clever feature.
Yeah, it's there. It definitely works. Okay, so you can see that on a sunny, you know, a day that's predicted to be sunny, it'll charge less. And on a day that's predicted to be cloudy, it'll do 100% charge. Great. Except sometimes it's wrong. And it happened only a few days ago. The forecast said it's going to be cloudy all day and it only charged about 60% because it must have thought there's going to be some sunshine, and there wasn't. So it went flat earlier than it should have. And what I really wish, okay, that's just one of those things. Weather forecasting, you know, is vague. But I wish there was a way you could tell the Tesla app, no, ignore the weather forecast overnight, please, and charge to this level.
Kind of an override for your own.
Because your circumstances might be that, oh, well, I'm going to be running the washing machine several times that day, or I know that I'm going to have...
It might be different the day after. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, or you might have a car that you want to charge even on, and sometimes you might need to charge that from the Powerwall, depending when your vehicle is in. You know, it's all well and good saying, oh, I'll charge them overnight, but that may not work for you. Yeah. So there really should be a way of overriding its predicted charge requirement and say, no, I want that level, please. And it could go the other way. It could be that you're going to be out all day and you can drop it to very low because you'll know your consumption is going to be near zero all day. But you just don't have that override, and I desperately wish they did. The only thing you can do is, in the middle of the night when your cheap rate starts, force it to some charge level. You can say that, you know, oh, I need 100% or something, and you can force it then, and then you need to switch it back again when the peak rate electricity starts, which is really inconvenient and ruins your sleep. You know?
Absolutely, you don't want to be doing that in the middle of the night.
No, I've had to though on occasion. I have actually do it.
No one wants that.
No. A question: we've had the Powerwall 2 installed here, and I don't know how much you know about the. Well, do you know the release date for the Powerwall 3 in the UK?
We don't at the minute. It's just late 2024. We've been told.
Right, autumn or something.
Yeah.
So we went for the Powerwall 2 rather than waiting for the Powerwall 3. Do you know if we had gone for Powerwall 3, could you do a 3 and a 2? Would they connect?
No, it's the short answer. They're not compatible.
They're not.
They're not, apparently. Not that I'm being told. They're not compatible.
Oh, that's short-sighted, isn't it? Oh, right. So we wouldn't have had the option of waiting for.
And I think it's possibly down to the inverter, the solar side that's been put into the Powerwall 3.
Right. So does that mean a Powerwall 3 would be inappropriate as a standalone?
No. You can still stand alone as long as there's not a standalone Powerwall 2 already on the installation.
Right.
But yeah, you can still have a standalone Powerwall 3 unit.
And it would come with an inverter that you're not going to use? You're
not going to use it, basically. Basically, yeah. But if, like you were talking about the consumption of the building, if it was, or the house, if it was a higher consumption, the Powerwall 3 will discharge capabilities is higher than the Powerwall 2. The Powerwall 2 is 5 kilowatts. The new Powerwall 3 is actually 11.5 kilowatts. So if you had a higher consumption and you just wanted a standalone battery, this is where we go into the realm of what's best for the situation and what's the requirements. If it's a higher consumption and they need it to discharge at a higher rate, the Powerwall 3 would be better even for a standalone unit, even though you're not using the solar side of the inverter.
Now, of course, we have two Powerwall 2s, and they'll both give you 5 kilowatts, won't they? So we could draw 10 from Powerwalls. Right, so that's one advantage of the Powerwall 3 is the extra load capability, but the charge is still 5 kilowatts, isn't it?
The capacity of the inverter is still 13.5.
Right, and the maximum charge level is still 5.
I believe so.
Yeah, otherwise it presumably roast the batteries.
Yeah.
And I understand that it uses different chemistry of batteries, doesn't it, which are larger and heavier and probably more suited to a Powerwall just going to sit there than the batteries that they use in the Powerwall 2, which are the same as they use in the cars.
Right.
Where size and weight are important.
Yeah.
But of course, they're not so much for a house. So does that mean it's bulkier?
It's actually not. It may be heavier, but they've actually managed to. It's a very similar size to the Powerwall 2.
Right.
Even with the solar inverter or the hybrid
as well
into it. Yeah, they're clever people at Tesla.
Right. But what, they're not clever enough to build the gateway into it then?
No, the gateway is still separate.
The consumer kind of doesn't want to see that, do they? They don't want to know about all these different blobs, the inverters and Powerwall, and they just want a box. And they're not quite there yet.
There's a little bit more feedback for Tesla. Let's get them to build the gateway in.
Or have the room to mount a gateway in there, because you presumably want one gateway even if you had multiple Powerwalls.
Yeah.
But it is a bit untidy having all these different blobs. And furthermore, when we had ours installed, I don't know if this is still true, we had to run a network cable to both the Powerwall and the gateway. That's just, the customer doesn't want to be messing about like that. You should only have to run one network cable.
One cable, one unit, all encompassed, nice and tidy. You know what's what then, don't you?
Yeah. Though at least it was the case that when we had the second Powerwall installed, we didn't need yet another network cable.
Yeah, because you can daisy chain them together at that point. Yeah.
Presumably the inverter on the Powerwall 3 would work with both the daisy chained and the load optimizer type solar system. The inverter doesn't know or care about that, does it? It just sees a voltage coming in.
The Powerwall 3, the inverter, obviously, it takes away from needing an extra inverter. It basically it puts the battery on the DC side of the install, not the AC. So a Tesla Powerwall 2 is on the AC side. The Tesla Powerwall 3 with the battery being one unit would be a DC coupled.
So that's more efficient potentially. So you've got DC coming in off the solar, and that charges.
It would directly into the battery. Yes.
That seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
because at the moment we're going to AC and then back to DC again.
It sometimes gets you around DNO issues as well.
Right.
Obviously, the national grid. That if you put the battery the DC side of an inverter, you can. They make allowances for that.
Okay.
The size of the inverter, not the size of the battery. If you put the Tesla Powerwall 2 in, which is an AC coupled battery, they also have to take that into account when doing the calculation.
Right, I understand that. So the G99 has to assume the worst case, which in our case would be a very bright sunny day, 5 kilowatts coming in off the solar, and both Powerwalls, for no particular reason, discharging into the grid all at the same time, which you would never do.
Yeah, you would never do, but they have to know that is on their system and has the capability of doing that.
Right, but if your solar is connected straight to your battery at DC, that's not a problem anymore.
What they take into account is the size of the inverter, not the battery that is connected to it.
Right.
Because you can only discharge back to it. It can only export back to the grid at a certain rate.
And that's all they need to worry about. Yeah.
Yes, that's all they
because otherwise you'd set fire to the cables. Supplying the house.
We don't like that happening. You can do a lot of damage.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, that our installation has 6.4 kilowatts peak of solar and a 5 kilowatt inverter. So if you've got, as we might, 6.4 kilowatts coming off your solar panels, then you can charge your Powerwall at, it's limited to 5 kilowatts, isn't it, I think? Charge level on the Powerwall 3, just like it is on the 2.
I believe so.
Same battery capacity. As I was saying, on our installation, we've got this 6.4 kilowatt peak. So we often see in summer that it clips. And in fact, you can even see it in winter. I've even seen it in like November. It'll clip. And you think, oh, come on, give us that bit. And there's this debate, which is always gone on, I think, about choosing the size of your inverter on, a normal installation without the Powerwall 3. Do they call it oversizing or something, where the solar has got more capacity than your inverter, and that is normal, and yet you see the clipping and you think that's wasted energy. But the reason it's done, and I do wonder how much of this is hearsay and how much is maths, right, that the lower rated inverters will start up earlier in lower light conditions.
Exactly.
That is really true.
Well, it's the voltages created by the panels that then kickstarts the inverter. So the smaller ones need a smaller voltage to kickstart them.
Right. So you can get more energy total out of a system with a somewhat reduced inverter size than you would if you'd gone for, like in our case, a 6 or 7 kilowatt inverter, because on dull days that bigger inverter wouldn't get started. Is that true?
It's
or is that a bit hearsay? Is that,
there's not much in it, is the honest answer. There is, at them sizes, there's not much in it.
Right.
So when you're saying you're losing energy or losing time, it's minimal, is the honest answer.
If you were to extrapolate the curve, it's just a little peak at the top that is chopped off. And very often, especially if you have only one Powerwall, it's at a time that you couldn't really do anything with it anyway. Your Powerwall's already full. It's a hot, it's a sunny day. Your Powerwall's already fully charged. You've got no more load in the house. All you could do is export it anyway. And you're spending extra money to get this tiny little blip of energy that you're going to export.
Yeah.
Yes, I can see how that may not make sense.
Yeah.
Maybe though, in some cases it does, right? If you've got a car that will always take the power.
Again, it's down to each individual client person's and their situation.
I kind of feel like I wish we'd gone for a bigger inverter, to be honest, because I hate seeing that clipping. So, and the extra cost of the inverter, I mean, how much more would it cost to go from a 5 kilowatt to a 6 kilowatt at install time? Only a couple £100, so wouldn't it?
There's not much to it. Yeah, there's not much to it. That's the honest answer.
So yeah, I'd be inclined to go for a bigger inverter by default, I think, and just that thought. It used to be the case, didn't it, when from Phoenix and then Egg, that they had their own installers at that time, and they've moved to a somewhat different model now where they have contractors. And in fact, the chap who did our first install also came and did our second install, but now he works for a different company that works with. Why the change?
I think a lot of solar companies are going down that route, if I'm being honest. We have our subcontractors nationwide that we call upon, and rather than sending it like engineers, we're based in Leeds, all the way down to, say, the South Coast. We have contractors in the area and spread around the country more than our own guys, and it seems to be more cost efficient to the business to do it that way.
Yeah.
And yes, the honest answer is that the contractors we use, that they sort of move around, and at the end of the day, their guys are subcontractors, and they will contract out to different companies. So it's everybody in the world of solar seems to know someone or have worked with someone from different companies, and it's a small world, if I'm being honest. And we seem to, everybody knows everybody.
Right. I understand, of course, you have to subcontract some things out, like the scaffolding and stuff like that. But yeah. So Dave, thank you very much indeed for your time today. It's been really fascinating talking to you, and I wish you well in this business, which I'm sure it's not maybe quite as profitable as it used to be when energy costs went nuts, but it's still, it's the future, isn't it? And every time I see a big south-facing roof, I keep looking at it. You should have solar up there.
No, thank you very much for your time, Colin.
Cheers.
And I hope everything's all right and goes well with your installs and your energy solutions in the coming future.
Super. Thank you much indeed.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Bye now.
A big thank you to Dave Simpson of Egg for that interview by Zoom. However, a couple of things came up after that call, so I had to ask a couple more questions. One of them was, we discussed that the Powerwall 2 and 3 are incompatible. So
for someone like ourselves who wanted to add extra capacity when they have a Powerwall 2, does that mean that the Powerwall 2 and 3 will be sold alongside each other? It's not just a case of the 3 will replace the 2. And he does assure me, yes, you will be able to buy Powerwall 2 systems in the future. They are going to be sold alongside each other for those people who require one or the other system. Another thing that came up was that there are some new regulations banning the installation of batteries in loft spaces. And I wanted his comment on that, and he very much agrees that putting batteries in a loft space is not a good idea. It's difficult and dangerous for the crew to get such a heavy piece of equipment up there, and if there was any kind of fire or other incident, whether it's battery related or not, you've got a big and heavy piece of equipment potentially coming down through the house in a bad situation. So it is better to have them in a much more accessible place should there be any issue in the future. Be it Powerwall related or not, it's better that it's in a safe place, and the fireman can access this the Powerwall easily if it's on the outside of the building. So definitely not a good place to put it in a loft. I'm not so sure personally if, with that thought process, you should avoid putting them in a garage as well. Now, Tesla Powerwalls are not known for catching fire. They've got an extremely good safety record. But in general, do you really want a big battery right next to your car? Especially if it happens to be a fossil fuel car, you've got petrol. And no, I don't think I would choose a garage location for Powerwall, even if there was space for one. And I had considered it when we first got our first Powerwall, and now of course adding a second Powerwall would have run out of space for a second one in there. So no, I think outdoors is a better location personally. Now, you know, I've been a bit concerned about the clipping effect of having an inverter that's less than the rated output of the solar panels. So I did a little bit of maths with a maths teacher friend of mine who helped me to fit some sine waves. So what I've done is pulled the data off the Powerwall for 2 dates, both of which were very sunny. One was the 20th of April 2024 and the other was 2nd of June. And I expected the 2nd of June one to show us pretty much the full maximum output power from the solar array, and the April one to show us a little bit less. And the things I wanted to see were the area under that clip to see how many kilowatt hours more we could have obtained with a bigger inverter, ignoring any effects, of course, of startup conditions needing to be slightly higher for a larger inverter, apparently. And the other thing I wanted to find out was the peak power output from the solar array, which I assume to be greater in June. And the results were interesting, not at all what I expected. One thing I found, of course, it's obvious when you think about it, was the sine wave we plotted was not on a 24-hour scale precisely. But then when you think about how sunrise and dusk progress throughout the year at certain times of the year, it's perhaps not surprising that there wasn't an exact fit for a sine wave completion in 24 hours. So that was a little interesting thing. But we fitted a sine wave so that it hugged the sides of the curve nicely, and that then allowed us to work out what the peak values should have been for those 2 scenarios, and also the area under the curves. And the interesting thing was that the peak was higher in April than it was in June. So the peak in April was assumed that the maximum we could get out of the array was 5,850 watts, whereas it was only 5,500 watts for June. And the reason probably is because in June the array gets hot, the solar array gets hot, and they are less efficient in conditions where extremely heated up. So I think that's why we got less output in June than we did in April on a similarly sunny day. I had to make a small adjustment for a small cloudy section in April, which would have otherwise given us an excessive gap between the peak of the curve and the flat. So I had to make a small adjustment for that, but even allowing for that, the amount of kilowatt hours assumed lost in June was around about 2.4 kilowatt hours. Not a great deal, and bear in mind that's one spectacularly sunny hot day. In April it's rather more, at about 4.5 kilowatt hours, which implies that maybe it is worth getting a inverter that's closer matched to your peak solar panel output. Now our solar panel output was specified at 6.4 kilowatts peak when it was new. Is now approaching 3 years old, and they do lose a little bit over time, but 6.4 kilowatts with a 5 kilowatt inverter, the results I'm getting kind of imply that maybe a 6 kilowatt inverter might have been better if we hadn't lost too much energy at the bottom in the startup conditions. But do bear in mind this is only really for particularly sunny days, and you also have to bear in mind what you're going to do with that energy. Because if you have a situation where you have a single Powerwall, you're on a very sunny day almost certainly going to get to the point where it's fully charged anyway. So what are you going to do with that energy? Well, dump it out to the grid, and you're not going to get paid an awful lot for that. So maybe with a second Powerwall, or if you have an electric car you can charge with this surplus energy, then maybe considering a slightly larger inverter than the planner might otherwise consider might be worth thinking about. The extra cost is minimal. Now I wanted to mention that the official Tesla app, which you could run on your phone or your tablet, is all well and good, but it isn't available on, for example, Windows PC. There is an unofficial app called the Powerwall Companion, which is available for Android and for Windows PC. So when I got those charts for you earlier and I was showing the clipping, I'd pulled the data off using that app. And it's also really good because if you've got an old Android phone lying around or tablet not doing anything else, you could load the app on here and you can keep an eye on the charge level of your Powerwalls all the time. You can keep it on 24 hours a day, maybe in the kitchen or your front room or somewhere, to keep an eye on your power levels. I should say though that if you do that, even with some updates this app has had, it can tend to burn the screen a bit. So maybe don't do that on a device you might want to use for something else later. Something else I was looking at was there's a tariff from Octopus called Agile, and on that one it can continuously vary not only how much the energy that you buy costs, but how much they will buy energy back from you. So it's designed for people who are ultimately flexible with their consumption and feed-in. So if you have perhaps 2 Powerwalls, 3 Powerwalls, and you've got to the situation where you have an excess of battery capacity, you can sell energy to them at those times they need it most, typically between about 4 and 7 p.m. But if you have to consume energy at those times, you will be paying quite a lot for it. I don't think that's going to suit us because, as you saw way at the beginning, one Powerwall was completely exhausted by the morning with our previous setup. 2 Powerwalls will get us probably into the afternoon somewhere in the middle of winter on a really cloudy day, but it's not going to get us to 4 or 7 p.m. We'd need 3 or even 4 Powerwalls for that. So I don't think that would suit us, but it could suit a few people. Right, I hope you've enjoyed what we've done today. We've learned a lot about Powerwalls and solar systems, and if you're considering such a system, do consider going with Egg. I'm going to have some information in the words below on how to get a 5% discount with them, and that could be quite a bit, so that could really make the difference and make it affordable. Right, I'll do plenty more content, especially on audio and video technology in the near future. If you've not been a subscriber of my channel, then have a look at the outro and you get to see some of the things I work on. Bye for now. I think on reflection, I would have liked the two Powerwalls to have been mounted at the same height, even though they're on separate walls. What do you think?